He laughed when he saw her shoes, but before the night was over, no one in that room would remember his name. The Friday crowd at Rust Barrel Sports Lounge came for cheap wings, cold beer, and the monthly dart tournament that always felt bigger than it was. Neon signs glowed against dark wood walls, country music hummed beneath the chatter, and every stool around the main board was taken by 7 o'clock. Men in team jerseys compared averages, regulars argued over past wins, and the bartender kept sliding baskets of fries across polished counters like clockwork. Then the front door opened, and in walked a woman no one expected to notice. Claire Bennett stepped inside wearing faded jeans, a gray sweater, and a pair of worn white sneakers that had seen better years. She carried a small leather case with weathered corners and a handle wrapped in old thread. Her light brown hair was tied back simply, and her expression was calm in the kind of way people often mistake for uncertainty. She paused just long enough to let her eyes adjust to the dim light, then made her way quietly to a small table near the back wall. No grand entrance, no performance, no need to be seen. Jason Cole saw her immediately. He always noticed anything that might become entertainment. At 34, Jason was the local favorite, the loudest player in the room, and the kind of man who treated every small victory like a championship parade. He leaned against the practice lane in a fitted black polo with his name stitched across the chest and twirled a dart between his fingers as he watched Claire sit down. "You think she's lost?" he asked loudly enough for 3 nearby tables to hear. A few men laughed. "Either that," one replied, "or she's here to fix the vending machine." More laughter followed. Claire said nothing. She simply set her leather case on the table, ordered hot tea, and folded her hands. Across the room, tournament host Megan Ross adjusted the microphone near the scoreboard. Megan loved momentum, loved noise, loved anything that kept eyes on the stage. She noticed the laughter gathering around Jason and smiled the smile of someone who sensed easy material. "Looks like Jason already found tonight's warm-up competition," she joked into the mic heads turned toward Claire. Some people laughed harder once they saw her sitting there alone. Jason raised his arms as if accepting applause. "Careful," he called out. "I don't want to ruin a beginner's confidence." Claire lifted her teacup, took one quiet sip, and looked toward the board with steady eyes. That look should have warned them. It did not, because arrogance rarely notices danger until it hears the sound of consequences. An older man seated near the jukebox narrowed his gaze at the leather case on her table. His smile slowly disappeared. He had seen one like it years ago on television broadcasts most of this room had forgotten. He stood halfway from his chair, then sat back down, saying nothing. Sometimes wisdom knows silence is better than interruption. Megan clapped into the microphone. "All right, folks, we start in 10 minutes. But maybe we should let our mystery guest throw one practice round for luck." Cheers rose instantly. Jason grinned. Claire placed her cup down with care, rested one hand on the old leather case, and for the first time that night, the room became interesting. Claire rested her fingers on the worn leather case as the crowd's laughter rolled across the room like a wave certain it could never break. Megan Ross leaned into the microphone with polished confidence. "Come on now, folks. Let us welcome our surprise challenger." She stretched the final word just enough to make the joke clear. A few people whistled. Others turned on their stools for a better look. Jason Cole stepped aside from the practice lane with exaggerated courtesy and pointed toward the throwing line. "After you," he said, bowing slightly. "Take your time. We would hate to rush greatness." More laughter followed. Claire stood without hurry. She lifted the leather case and walked toward the board with the calm pace of someone entering a familiar room. The floorboards creaked beneath her sneakers. The overhead lights reflected softly against the polished wood lanes. Every eye tracked her now, though none of them truly saw her. They saw plain clothes. They saw quiet posture. They saw an easy target. They did not see discipline built over years, or the kind of focus that survives disappointment. At the bar, the older man near the jukebox kept staring at the case. He rubbed his jaw, then looked again at Claire's hands. Steady hands. No wasted motion. His expression tightened with recognition he was not ready to speak aloud. Megan smiled toward the audience. Tell us your name, mystery player. Claire turned slightly. Claire Bennett. Her voice was soft but clear. Well, Claire Bennett, Megan replied. Have you ever played competitively before? A smirk passed through the room. Jason folded his arms, already enjoying the answer he expected. Claire met Megan's eyes. A long time ago, that only made them laugh harder. Jason shook his head. That means no. He spun one of his darts across his knuckles. Do you know the rules, Claire? I know enough, she said. The room reacted with amused murmurs. Confidence sounds different when it comes from the underestimated. Megan tapped the scoreboard tablet. Since this is just for fun, one practice round. 3 darts. Closest score wins applause. She glanced at Jason. Try not to be intimidated. Jason grinned at the crowd. I am terrified. Claire set the leather case on a nearby high table and opened it. The hinges gave a soft click. Inside, nestled in dark velvet, lay 3 darts unlike the bright modern sets sold behind the bar. They were simple, steel-barreled, carefully maintained. Their flights replaced many times but aligned with exact precision. The room quieted a little. Even mockery pauses when something old carries dignity. Claire lifted 1 dart between thumb and forefinger. She rolled her shoulders once, then once more. Nothing dramatic, just memory waking up inside the body. Jason watched her stance and smirked again. You are holding it wrong, he said loudly. Maybe for you, Claire answered. Several people exchanged looks. Megan raised her brows. The bartender stopped wiping a glass. The older man by the jukebox slowly stood to his feet. Claire stepped to the line. 1 sneaker just behind the mark. Chin level. Eyes fixed on the center of the board. The room felt smaller now. The music seemed farther away. Jason still smiled, but less naturally than before. Claire drew 1 steady breath and let it out. Then she lifted her arm with the smooth certainty of repetition practiced beyond counting. In that moment, before the dart ever left her hand, the room began to understand it had mistaken silence for weakness. The dart left Claire Bennett's fingers with no flourish, no hesitation, no wasted motion. It traveled in a clean silver line through the warm bar light and struck the board with a sharp, centered sound that seemed louder than it should have been. Bullseye. Not close. Not lucky. Perfect. For half a second, no one reacted because disbelief often arrives before sound. Then the room went silent. Glasses paused halfway to lips. A waitress froze beside table 12 holding a basket of onion rings. Even the neon buzz above the bar felt quieter. Jason Cole's grin remained on his face only because it had not yet received the message. Megan Ross stared at the board, then at Claire, then back at the board as if numbers might explain what eyes could not. Well, she said finally, her voice thinner than before, that was a nice throw. A few uncertain claps rose from the back, then died quickly. The older man near the jukebox exhaled through his nose and nodded once to himself. He had seen that release years ago on television under brighter lights and bigger stakes. Claire did not celebrate. She simply reached into the case and selected the 2nd dart. Jason straightened his shoulders. Anybody can hit 1 good shot, he said loudly, trying to return oxygen to the room. Even a broken clock gets lucky twice a day. Some people laughed, but it sounded borrowed now. Claire stepped back to the line. Her expression did not change. She looked at the board the way a pianist looks at keys or a pilot checks the sky. Familiar, respectful, certain. She raised the 2nd dart, inhaled once, and released. The steel point buried itself beside the first in the inner ring with surgical precision. Gasps spread across the room like sparks finding dry grass. Megan lowered the microphone from her mouth. Jason's arms fell to his sides. A younger player near lane 3 whispered, "No way." Another muttered, "Who is she?" The older man answered quietly to no one in particular. "Someone you should have greeted politely." Claire reached for the 3rd dart. Now no one laughed. The room had crossed into a different country entirely, one where arrogance needed permission to speak. Jason stepped forward. "Hold on," he said. Maybe we should reset the board. Make sure everything is official. Megan blinked at him. It is a practice round. Exactly, Jason replied too quickly. Practice rounds do not count. Claire turned her head slightly toward him. Neither did your jokes, she said. A few people near the bar covered smiles. Jason's jaw tightened. Claire faced forward again. The third dart rested lightly in her hand. There was no tension in her wrist, no drama in her stance. Just mechanics refined into grace. She released. The dart landed true, completing a grouping so tight that several people pushed forward to confirm there were truly 3 darts there and not one. Then the room erupted. Cheers, shouts, hands slamming tabletops, stools scraping wood floors. Phones appeared from pockets. Megan finally found her voice. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we just witnessed something extraordinary. Jason did not clap. He stared at the board as if it had betrayed him personally. Claire calmly retrieved her darts and returned them to the velvet case. The old man approached 2 steps, then stopped. Claire Bennett, he said carefully. National Finals, Denver, 12 years ago? She met his gaze. A long time ago, she replied. His eyes widened. You were Claire Dawson. The room quieted again. Jason looked from the man to Claire, and for the first time that night, confidence left him completely. The name hung in the air like a dropped glass. Claire Dawson. A few older regulars repeated it under their breath, searching memory. Then recognition began moving through the room table by table. 12 years ago, before streaming channels and phone clips turned every hobby into content, Claire Dawson had been one of the most precise dart players in the country. She had won regional titles, appeared on cable sports coverage, and reached the national finals in Denver with a style commentators called effortless. Then she vanished. No scandal, no farewell tour, just gone. Megan Ross blinked rapidly as she looked from Claire to the older man. You mean that Claire Dawson? She asked. The man nodded. The one who hit 3 9-darters in one season. A low murmur rolled across the lounge. Jason Cole swallowed hard. He had spent years being the biggest name in rooms exactly like this one. Suddenly he was standing beside a legend he had mistaken for a joke. Claire closed the leather case gently. That was another life, she said. Her tone carried no pride, only distance. Megan stepped forward with renewed energy, sensing the night had changed shape. Ladies and gentlemen, we may have a very special guest in the building. Cheers answered immediately. Phones rose higher. Someone near the bar shouted, "Play Jason." Another voice joined, then another, until the chant formed itself. Play Jason. Play Jason. Jason forced a smile that looked expensive and fragile. Come on now, he said, lifting his hands. We do not need to make a circus out of it. But he had built his reputation on public attention, and attention can be loyal only to itself. Megan tilted the microphone toward him. You are tonight's top seed, Jason. Surely you would not turn down a friendly exhibition. The crowd loved that word. Friendly. It meant nothing and everything. Jason glanced at Claire. If she wants to play. Claire slipped a loose strand of hair behind her ear. I came for tea, she said. Laughter burst through the room. But now it was warm and aimed elsewhere. Jason's face tightened. Right, he replied. Because champions always travel with custom darts for tea. Claire met his stare calmly. Some people carry reminders. The room hummed with approval. Megan sensed victory and pressed harder. One leg. 301. Winner takes bragging rights. Jason could not refuse without shrinking in front of everyone who had helped inflate him. Fine, he said. One leg. He rolled his shoulders and reached for his polished tournament case. The swagger returned in pieces, though not enough to look convincing. Claire remained still. The older man stepped beside her quietly. I watched you in Denver, he said. You never rushed a throw. Claire smiled faintly. I rushed many things after Denver. He nodded, understanding more than she explained. Good to see you back. I am not back, she answered. I just stopped hiding for an hour. Megan called both players to the lane. The scoreboard lights flickered on bright green. Names appeared side by side. Jason Cole and Claire Bennett. Claire noticed the second name and said nothing. Some people bury old versions of themselves because memory can be heavier than grief. Jason bounced on his heels and tested the distance to the line. He needed movement. He needed noise. Claire simply stood with one hand resting on the leather case. Then a woman from table 6 spoke loudly enough for all to hear. Maybe do not judge shoes next time, Jason. The laughter that followed hit harder than any insult. Jason looked toward the board, jaw set. Claire looked toward the floor for a moment, then lifted her eyes with the same quiet steadiness that had changed the room once already. Respect had entered the building, and arrogance was learning there was no seat reserved for it. The crowd pressed closer as Megan Ross raised one hand and announced the exhibition match with the excitement of someone who had accidentally found gold. 301 straight out. Jason Cole versus Claire Bennett. Cheers answered from every corner of Rust Barrel Sports Lounge. Glasses clinked. Chairs scraped. Even customers who had come only for dinner now stood near the lanes, sensing they were about to witness something worth remembering. Jason Cole stepped first to the throwing line. He adjusted his collar, rolled his neck, and forced a grin back onto his face. Confidence can be rehearsed, but fear often leaks through the edges. He looked over his shoulder at the room as if asking it to return to the old script where he was the main attraction. It did not. Claire stood several feet behind him with her leather case closed at her side, calm as winter water. Megan tapped the scoreboard. Jason has the throw. He nodded sharply and launched his first dart hard enough to announce irritation. Triple 20. The room applauded. His second found triple 19. His third landed single 20. Strong opening. Jason turned with raised arms, inviting approval. He received it, though not with the volume he expected. Everyone kept glancing past him toward Claire. Attention had already changed owners. 157, Megan called. Nicely done. Jason smirked toward Claire. You can still back out. No shame in losing to experience. Claire answered by opening her case. She selected 3 darts and walked to the line. The room quieted on instinct now. Some moments train silence better than rules ever could. She looked at the board only once. No calculations visible, no drama, no warm-up toss. Just one measured breath. The first dart struck triple 20. A ripple moved through the crowd. The second landed beside it, tight enough to look guided. Triple 20 again. Jason's smirk faded. Claire released the third. Triple 20. Maximum score. For a moment the lounge exploded so loudly that Megan had to step back from the microphone laughing in disbelief. 180, she shouted once the cheers settled enough to hear. Ladies and gentlemen, she just opened with a maximum. Jason stared at the board, then at Claire, then at his own darts resting in the tray. Nothing wounds ego faster than being outclassed by someone it dismissed. Claire stepped aside without expression. She did not celebrate. She did not glance at Jason. She simply returned the remaining darts to her palm and waited. The older man near the jukebox folded his arms proudly. Same release, he said to no one in particular. Not a day slower. Jason approached the line again, jaw tight. He threw too quickly this time. Triple 20, single 5, single 1. Groans rose from his supporters. He snatched the last dart from the board harder than necessary and marched back. Megan's cheerful tone softened with caution. Pressure changes math, folks. Jason shot her a look she wisely ignored. Claire stepped forward again. Her eyes stayed steady on the board while the room held its breath. She scored another clean combination, leaving a checkout route so elegant that even 2 league players near the bar shook their heads in admiration. She is setting traps, one whispered. No, said the other. She is setting standards. Jason heard them. His ears reddened. He looked around the room he once controlled and saw something new in every face. Curiosity, respect, amusement. None of it belonged to him anymore. Claire stepped back from the line and rested her darts lightly in her hand. Jason was still mathematically alive in the match, but everyone understood numbers were no longer the real contest. Tonight was about who a room believes when the noise is gone. And for the first time in years, Jason Cole had nothing loud enough to say. Jason Cole stepped to the line again with the stiff posture of a man trying to look composed while everything inside him was slipping. The scoreboard glowed above the lane, cold and impartial. Claire Bennett had left herself a clean finish route. Jason needed brilliance now, and brilliance does not usually answer panic. He drew a long breath, squared his shoulders, and released his first dart. Triple 20. Strong. A few cheers returned from loyal friends near the bar. He grabbed the second dart quickly, too quickly, clipped the wire and dropped into single 20. A murmur rolled through the room. Jason's jaw flexed. He knew the math. He knew he had just invited pressure to sit on his shoulder. His third dart landed in single 1. No one laughed, but silence can embarrass louder than mockery ever could. Megan Ross glanced at the scoreboard. Jason leaves 100. Her voice carried sympathy she had not shown Claire earlier. The room noticed that too. Jason retrieved his darts and returned without looking at anyone. Claire rose from her stool as if called by something quieter than applause. She carried no urgency, only control. Some people rush toward victory because they fear it may leave. Others walk because they know it is already waiting. She stepped to the line and studied the board. 81 remained, a common finish for practiced hands. Yet the room held its breath as if watching surgery. The first dart struck treble 19. Gasped. 60 left. Jason stared at the board, lips pressed thin. Claire twirled the second dart once between her fingers, then sent it cleanly into single 3. 57 remaining. A few players looked confused. Then the older man by the jukebox smiled broadly. He understood. She had opened the angle she wanted. Claire lifted the final dart. "She is setting it up," he whispered. The room fell still enough to hear the refrigeration hum behind the bar. Claire released. The dart buried itself in bullseye. Dead center. The lounge erupted so violently with cheers that Megan laughed into the microphone and covered one ear. Chairs shook. Drinks spilled. Someone slapped the bar top so hard the bartender shouted and grinned at the same time. "Match Claire Bennett," Megan announced, voice nearly swallowed by the noise. Jason did not move for several seconds. He remained facing the board, watching the center ring as though answers might appear there if he stared long enough. Then he turned slowly. The room that once fed his swagger was no longer looking at him with admiration. Some looked amused. Some disappointed. Most simply looked past him. Claire collected her darts with careful hands and returned them to the leather case. Jason finally spoke. "You got lucky." The words came out thin, even to him. The cheers softened. People waited. Claire looked at him kindly, which somehow hurt more than anger would have. "3 times tonight?" she asked. Laughter rolled through the room, warm and unstoppable. Jason's face reddened. "You think one night changes anything?" he snapped. Claire closed the case latch with a soft click. "No," she said, "but it can reveal what was already there." The words landed harder than any insult because they were true. Megan stepped forward, eyes shining with the kind of story hosts dream of stumbling into. "Claire, where have you been all these years?" Claire glanced around the room, at the phones recording, at the people now eager to celebrate what they had mocked an hour earlier. "Living," she answered simply. Then she turned toward the exit. The crowd parted without being asked. Respect often moves more smoothly than ego. As Claire reached the door, the older man called after her. "Will we see you next month?" She paused with one hand on the handle and smiled without turning around. "Depends," she said. "Has the room learned anything yet?" Then she stepped into the night, leaving behind a silence far more powerful than the one she had entered. The door closed behind Claire Bennett, and for several seconds Rust Barrel Sports Lounge stood in the kind of silence people remember years later. It was no longer the silence of mockery waiting for a punchline. It was the silence that follows being corrected by reality. Then the room erupted again, not with laughter this time, but with overlapping voices trying to reclaim the moment they had nearly missed. "Did you record that?" She hit bullseye to finish. Was that really Claire Dawson? Phones lit up across the bar as clips were replayed from every angle. On tiny screens, the same truth repeated itself. The woman they dismissed had walked in quietly and left carrying the room's respect with her. Megan Ross lowered her microphone and exhaled. Her smile remained, but it had changed. Earlier it had belonged to performance. Now it carried embarrassment sharpened by self-awareness. She looked toward Jason Cole, who still stood near the lane with his darts in hand, unsure what to do with them now that swagger no longer fit. "Jason," she said carefully, "you want to say anything to the crowd?" He glanced around at faces that had once echoed whatever mood he chose to set. Tonight those same faces waited with curiosity rather than loyalty. That difference can humble a person faster than defeat. "It was one match," he muttered. A few people shook their heads. The older man by the jukebox stepped forward slowly. "No," he said. "It was one lesson." The room murmured in agreement. Jason looked away. Megan set the microphone on the table and approached him in a lower voice that still carried through the quiet. "You should have shaken her hand before she left." Jason forced a bitter laugh. "She wanted attention." The bartender, who had watched everything from behind polished wood, spoke without looking up from the glass he was drying. "Funny. She is the only one here who never asked for it." Several heads turned toward Jason again. He felt the room slipping farther from him with every sentence. Reputation built on noise often disappears in silence. Near table 6, the woman who had mocked Jason earlier raised her drink. "To the lady in old sneakers," she said. Others joined. Glasses lifted across the lounge. "To Claire." The toast spread naturally, warmly, with none of the forced enthusiasm Jason used to command. Megan looked toward the exit door where Claire had vanished into the cool night. "I made her part of a joke," she said quietly. "She made us part of a story." The older man nodded. "That is what class looks like." Jason finally placed his darts into their case and snapped it shut harder than necessary. "You all act like she is some saint," he said. "She embarrassed me on purpose." "No," said the bartender again. "You did that before she ever threw." This time no one argued. Truth had become easier to hear in that room. Jason grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. No one stopped him. No one called after him. Attention, once lost, rarely offers a farewell. After he left, Megan climbed back onto the small platform and picked up the microphone once more. "Next month," she announced, "new house rule. Anyone who walks through that door gets respect first." The applause came instantly. It was louder than anything Jason had received all year. The older man smiled into his drink. "Took a champion 5 minutes to improve this place." Outside, under the amber parking lot lights, Claire walked to an older blue sedan parked near the edge of the lot. She placed the leather case gently on the passenger seat and sat behind the wheel. Through the windshield, she could still hear faint cheers from inside. She smiled to herself, not because she had won, but because something smaller and harder had shifted. Sometimes people do not need to be defeated. They need to be reminded. Claire started the engine and drove into the night, leaving the lounge brighter than she found it. By the next morning, Rust Barrel Sports Lounge was busier than it had been on any Saturday in years, and not because of wings or drink specials. Every television above the bar replayed shaky phone footage from the night before. In one clip, Claire Bennett's first perfect center hit froze the room. In another, her final bullseye finish sent the crowd into chaos. Someone had uploaded the videos before midnight, and by sunrise they had spread through local sports pages, neighborhood groups, and message threads full of people suddenly claiming they had known exactly who she was. Fame often attracts memory after the fact. Megan Ross arrived early and stood beneath the screens with folded arms, watching herself on video smile at the wrong moment. It is uncomfortable to witness your own shallowness in high definition. She asked the bartender to turn the sound down. He did not. "Good morning," he said, polishing glasses with a grin. "Celebrity host." Megan sighed. "I deserved that." "Probably," he replied kindly. The older man from the jukebox entered a few minutes later wearing a denim jacket and carrying a folded newspaper. The headline on the local entertainment page read, "Forgotten Champion Humbles Bar Favorite." He laid it on the counter. "Never thought I would see darts on page 3, he said. Megan looked at the article and winced. There was a still image of Jason Cole mid-smirk beside Claire's calm expression. Some pictures explain character better than biographies. "Do we know where she is?" Megan asked. The old man shrugged. "People who value peace usually do not leave forwarding addresses." Around noon, Jason arrived through the side entrance wearing sunglasses, though it was cloudy outside. Conversations dipped when people recognized him, then resumed with unusual politeness. He hated that more than open judgment. He removed the glasses and approached the bar. "Coffee," he said. The bartender poured it without comment. Jason glanced up at the television where his own face was frozen in disbelief. "Can you turn that off?" he asked. "No," said the bartender. "But I can turn it louder." A few customers laughed softly. Jason lowered his eyes. Humility often enters through doors pride once locked. Megan walked over, setting the microphone she used on Friday nights beside him. "I was wrong too," she said. "I made her a punchline before she threw a dart." Jason stirred his coffee, though he had not added anything to it. "I know. Then say it out loud sometime," Megan replied. She returned to the stage area and began taping a new sign near the entrance. When she finished, people gathered to read it. "Respect is the house rule. No exceptions." The old man smiled broadly. "About time." Jason looked at the sign for a long moment. Then he reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and opened the clip everyone else had been replaying. He watched Claire's first throw in silence. No arrogance, no celebration, just precision. Then he watched his own face after it landed. He closed the phone slowly. "Do you know her full name?" he asked the old man. "Depends which life you mean," the man answered. Jason nodded once. "If she comes back, tell her I owe her an apology." The bartender raised an eyebrow. "You can tell her yourself if she returns." Jason stood, left cash for the coffee, and headed toward the door. Before stepping outside, he paused beneath the new sign and read it again. Then he straightened it where one corner had curled loose. Small actions do not erase old behavior, but they can introduce a better future. That evening, another crowd filled Rust Barrel. Some came hoping Claire would return. She did not. Yet every stranger who entered was greeted warmly, offered a seat, and treated like they belonged. Sometimes the greatest shot is not the one that hits the center. It is the one that changes the room after it lands. 3 weeks passed, and Rust Barrel Sports Lounge became known for something it had never valued before: manners. New players were welcomed before they were measured. Beginners were offered spare darts without jokes attached. The sign near the entrance remained straight and clean, its message repeated so often it began to sound natural. Respect is the house rule. No exceptions. Some transformations arrive loudly. The better ones settle in quietly and stay. Jason Cole still came on Friday nights, but the room no longer revolved around him. At first he hated that feeling. Then, little by little, he learned from it. He congratulated winners without forcing smiles. He helped a nervous teenager with stance and grip. He even laughed when he missed, which shocked regulars more than any score ever had. Reputation can be rebuilt, but only brick by brick and never by speech alone. Megan Ross changed too. Her microphone still carried energy, but now it carried fairness with it. She introduced first-time players with the same enthusiasm she once reserved for favorites. When crowds laughed at someone's awkward warm-up throw, she cut through the noise with a single line. "Everybody starts somewhere." The room would settle immediately. It is amazing how quickly culture changes when humiliation is no longer entertained. On the 4th Friday of the month, the tournament reached its semi-final round when the front door opened and a hush moved across the room before anyone even turned to look. Claire Bennett stepped inside wearing the same faded jeans, the same gray sweater, and the same old white sneakers. Her leather case rested in one hand. No dramatic music announced her. No spotlight found her. Yet every person in the room felt her arrival like weather. Then applause began near the bar and spread through the lounge until everyone was standing. Claire paused, surprised, then smiled with the modest discomfort of someone who never came seeking celebration. Jason was nearest the lane. He set down his darts and walked toward her with no swagger at all. The room quieted to hear what pride owed humility. "Claire," he said, voice steady but sincere, "I judged you before I knew you. I was rude, arrogant, and small. I am sorry. No excuses, no jokes, no blame, just the truth spoken plainly." Claire studied him for a moment. People often expect forgiveness to be instant or dramatic. Real forgiveness usually looks simpler than that. She nodded once. "Then do better than that version of yourself," she said. "That is enough for me." Jason exhaled as though he had been carrying weight for weeks. He offered his hand. Claire shook it. The room applauded again, louder than before. The older man by the jukebox wiped one eye and pretended it was allergies. Megan laughed into the microphone. "Well, folks, now I need a new favorite moment." Claire glanced around the lounge and noticed the sign by the entrance. "You kept it up," she said. "We needed it," the bartender replied. Turns out the room was the thing missing practice. Laughter rolled warmly through the crowd. Megan stepped down from the platform. "Will you play tonight?" she asked. Claire considered the board, the gathered faces, the changed atmosphere. "One round," she said. Cheers exploded instantly. But before taking the lane, Claire opened her leather case and handed one dart to the nervous teenager Jason had been helping earlier. "You throw first," she said. The boy looked stunned. "Me?" "Yes," Claire answered. Confidence grows faster when someone lends it. He stepped to the line with shaking hands and hit a modest single 20. The room cheered as if it were a championship finish. His shoulders lifted. He smiled. Claire smiled too, because she had not returned to prove anything. She had returned to confirm that people can change when they choose humility over ego. And that night, in a bar once ruled by laughter at others, kindness finally became the loudest sound in the room.